You have probably sat in a meeting or watched a conversation happen where one person said something and the entire room just shifted and agreed on that specific thing. And it's not because they talked the loudest or knew the most fact, but something about how they saw the situation was just different from how everyone else was seeing it. And you walked away thinking, why didn't I think of it the way? I would have those exact moments in my life, and for a long time, I assumed the people who think like that were just wired differently, but deep down, if we see, they are not. What they are actually build is a specific set of mental habits, and once you see what they are, you start realizing you are fully capable of building single, every single one of yourself. So I will be share six habits that can actually help you to become a strategic thinker. Let's get into them. Number one is focus on building something that lasts. Most people optimize for whatever solves today's problem and that feel responsible in the moment because today's problem is loud and future problem is far and quick. Richard Rumelt, who spent years studying why some strategies actually work and most don't, made an observation that stuck with me at the first time I read it. A huge amount of what gets called strategy is actually just a list of goals and good intentions with no real structure underneath it, built to feel good in a meeting rather than to survive contact with reality over years. A real strategy thinker asks a different question uh, before acting on anything. Not does this fix the problem in front of me, but does this still make sense 5 years from now? Or am I just borrowing against my future to feel better today? This shows up in small, unglamorous ways more often than dramatic ones. Choosing to build a skill slowly instead of chasing a shortcut that expires. Choosing a relationship or a business partnership based on whether it holds up under pressure rather than how good it feels right now. Their strategy isn't smarter in the moment, they are just asking a longer question than everyone else is asking, and that longer question changes almost every decision that follow it. Number two is see the second and third order impact. Howard Marks, one of the most respectful investor of the last few years, describes something he calls second level thinking, and it's one of the cleanest explanation of strategic thinking. I have cross first level thinking asks what will happen, second level thinking asks what will happen and how will everyone else react on that, and what happen after they react. Most people stop at the first question. Strategic thinker keep going. Here's a simple way to picture it. If you drop a stone into water, the splash is first order effect, the thing everyone notice immediately, but the ripples that spread outward afterward, the way they interact with the edges of pond, the way they eventually bounce back toward the center, that's the second and third impact. And it's usually where the real consequence of a decision actually live. A price cut looks good at one day. The second order effect is competition cutting their prices too. The third order effect is an entire industry with thinner margin that they look year to recover from a decision that looked smart for about a week. Training yourself to pause and ask, and then what happened after that? Before every significant decision is one of the simplest, most underused habit that separate strategic people from reactive ones. Number three is become a creative problem solver. Most problems that feel stuck aren't actually unsolvable. They are stuck because everyone attempting them keep approaching from the same angle, using the same assumption, and getting the same dead end every time. Edward, who spent his career studying creative things formally, says that creativity is a learnable skill built on intentionally breaking your default thinking pattern, and it's not a personality trait you either have or don't. One practical version of this is asking what the opposite of the obvious solution would look like, even if it sounds absurd at first. If the obvious answer to slow sale is more marketing, the opposite question is what happen if you spend zero on marketing and put that money into the product instead. Most of the time, opposite answer isn't right one either, but asking it forces your brain out of the single track it was stuck on. And often the actual answer end up somewhere between the obvious solution and its opposite. In a sport you would never have found by only walking the familiar path. Strategic thinker manufacture this kind of friction in their own thinking instead of setting for the first workable idea that shows up. Number four is write a clear and persuasive story. Having the right answer means very little if you can't get anyone else to actually understand and act on it. And this is where a lot of genuinely smart strategic people fail without realizing that's the problem. Nancy Durate, who has studied how the most influential presentations and speeches in history were actually structured, found something consistent across almost all of them. They weren't built as a list of facts. They were built a story with clear and after a specific tension the audience could feel and a resolution that made the path forward obvious. A strategic thinker doesn't just think clearly, they translate their clear thinking into something someone else can actually follow and act on. Because a brilliant strategy that lives only inside your own head has changed nothing yet. The practical version of this is simple to describe even though it takes real practice to build. Before you present any idea, ask what the story actually is, what happens if nothing changes, what happens if nothing changes, and what does the path forward actually look like in a language a person with zero background on the topic could still follow. If you can't answer those three things clearly, the idea isn't ready yet, no matter how sound the underlying logic is. Number five is use logic to make good decision. Daniel Kahneman, whose work on decision making eventually won a Nobel Prize, spent a year documenting how consistently human beings make decisions based on emotions and instinct first. Then after the build a logical sounding justification for it afterward, believing the whole time that logic came first. Understanding this about your own mind is uncomfortable, but it's also one of the most useful things a strategic thinker ever learned about themselves because it means the feeling of certainty is not actually evidence that you reasoned your way to right answer. The practical fix isn't pretending you can remove emotion from decision and entirely because you can't and shouldn't try to. It's building a habit of searching the decision from the feeling before you finalize it. Write down the actual reason for a significant decision plainly and then ask honestly whether those reasons would still convince a stranger who had no emotion stake in the outcome. If they wouldn't, you have probably found the feeling dressed up as logic. And that's exactly the moment to slow down before committing to anything. Number six is observe data and ask so what. Information on its own is close to worthless until someone actually does something with it. And this is where a lot of otherwise smart, well informed people get stuck. They can tell you every static and every trend with total accuracy and still have no clear idea of what to actually do then. Someone who never looked at any of it. Barbara Minto, who developed a widely used framework for clear business communication, built her entire approach around one simple repeated discipline. After every piece of data or every observation, force yourself to ask, so what? Out loud if you have to until an actual conclusion or action fall out the other end. Data tells you that sales dropped 15% last quarter. So what? That means the timing of the new product launch overlap badly with a competitor's promotion. So what? That means the launch date needs to move next time and that's a decision strategy. Thinker rarely stop at the one's observation. They keep asking, so what, until the observation turn into something they can actually act on. And that single repeated question is one of the simplest habit on this entire list to start using immediately. None of these six habits require you to be naturally gifted at strategy. They require you to slow down at a specific moment before deciding, before reaching, before presenting, before settling of the first idea, and ask a slightly different, slightly longer question than the one everyone around you is asking. I'll build the habit consistently enough and strategic thinking stop being something other people seem to have and start being something you actually do. That's it for today. If one of these six genuinely stood out to you, I would like to know which one. Tell me in the comments. See you in the next one. Thank you.